The education landscape is absolutely bursting at its seams because every day, every lane seems to have a new school cropping up, as if choosing from amongst that bevy of options wasn't conundrum enough. Add to the mix the fact that there continues to be a large coterie of boarding stroke residential schools, most of which come with a lot of legacy, are considered by many to be hallowed turf as far as education goes, and that choice becomes almost impossible. Now, if we sort of bring that up to date in terms of the skill sets and the kinds of attributes that students and youngsters in today's environment ought to be pursuing in order to equip themselves best for what is at best an uncertain future, a future that will inevitably be dominated by technology, artificial intelligence, then that question becomes even more nuanced, and it might be worth investigating that, particularly from a mental health psychological lens. What type of system, residential or the good old day school, works better, or if not better or worse, certainly we can explore elements of both those systems of education that impact the child's mental well being in a positive or not so positive manner. Now, this is a tricky area, and I'm therefore delighted that I'm being joined by somebody who is the director of an entire group of schools. She is herself a proud product of a very well known residential school, and has been mum to somebody who has been to both types of institutions, therefore, endowing her with a very, very sort of ringside view, if you will, of the type of institutions she's not attended, and of course, from her own lived experience, vast insights around the types of institutions she did herself attend. Joining us is Namisha Rastogi, who is the director of Brainz Group of Schools in Meerut. And in the interest of full disclosure, although I wouldn't have said this, but this will be a backhanded compliment to her. I've known her for many, many years. We were batchmates while I was at Doon and she was at Welham, which gives you a sense of how I have, aged and she hasn't, or has been able to ostensibly beat it or reverse it. So it's wonderful to have an old friend back, but more importantly, someone who is very deeply entrenched in this passionately on an everyday basis. So we are calling this session Emotionally Brainy Brawn. This is Talk Therapy brought to you by Driveway Devi, and I'm Karthik. On behalf of Driveway Devi, I would like to thank Namisha for making the time to do this, because she is voluntarily a workaholic, and I really appreciate that she's made the time. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Karthik, and thank you for the compliment. And it's an absolute pleasure for me, and something that I would love to talk about and share with people, because a lot of parents come to me with this question, that whether they should send their children to boarding school. Also, of course, because of the reasons that you rightly mentioned, that because I studied there, and now my daughter studied there, and of course, because I'm running my own group of schools as well. So thank you so much for that, and it's an absolute pleasure for me to be here.
Super. Let's dive straight in. But before we sort of get into the murky waters of what these institutions are doing to our children, consciously or unconsciously, tell our audience a little bit about your own work these days, about Brains.
Okay, so I started the school 22 years back. We started off as a small kindergarten, and when my own schooling was essentially from a day school here in Meerut, and then after studying there till about class 10 is the time I went on to Welham. And when I went to Welham, I remember I came back and I told my father, I said, I wish I had gone there earlier because I got so much from that school. And my principal back then, Mrs. Verma, I mean, it was an absolute pleasure, having her there to lead us. And when I started this school, the vision that I had was that as an average student academically, what was it that I did not get in the day school that I was studying in here, and what I got when I went to the residential school? So, when I started the school, I really wanted to kind of create that balance and give the children what I felt was lacking in the education in a day school at that point of time. But definitely now the gap has bridged, and there is so much that is happening in day schools as well, which is why that constant question of whether a day school or a residential school, which one works better.
Absolutely. I mean, that's actually really, really well articulated, and just sort of going forward from there. The landscape has changed so dramatically in any case. I mean, I have no qualms in admitting that there was absolutely nothing in the way of pastoral care on my campus. Certainly back in the day, it was quite clear that it was a jungle out there and it was survival of the fittest. Although there was a framework for there to have been actually quite effective sort of mentoring, etc., because we had tutors and we had regular meetings with them, and it was a very small group of students, so that person also could be very effective. But most of that, and this is no criticism necessarily, but most of that sort of went in other pursuits, just being outside and getting into damaged boats in Nainital that capsized and all sorts of no good. So, and I think I speak safely, I can say, for the vast majority of schools at that time, be they day schools or residential schools, in the understanding and focus placed on a child's mental well-being. We've come a long way since, and now certain things are even mandated. Give us a sense of, first and foremost, before we draw the comparison, how important do you feel it is for schools to lay some emphasis on the psychological development or state of children nowadays at school?
Yeah, so I think before I kind of talk about schools, I think what we all need to understand today is that how parenting has changed. Back when we went to school, I think the attitude of the parents was very carefree. Not just that they had that attitude, but I think also the environment was such. I mean, I can't remember anyone talking about mental health back then, and it was something that was never a concern for our parents. And I think the way parents brought us up was kind of, we were very independent. And today, not just that the parents have changed, I think the entire environment has changed. So as a result, parents have gotten very protective, very possessive, and at the same time, very involved. So, because parenting has changed, children have changed. I mean, we cannot compare today's children with what we were like as children back then. So, I think essentially the first thing we need to look at is how parenting has changed. And because of that, now the emphasis on mental health, and also that now it is very openly talked about. Earlier, it was taboo. I'm sure there must have been many children, facing these kind of issues, but never talked about, never even shared with the parents because parents also did not understand. Forget the school. I mean, the school is secondary. It is first the parents whom you're living with. However, now because A, parents are very aware, B, schools, I feel, have a very major role because school is a place where, the child goes and kind of mingles socially with a maximum number of, children or students, or makes friends. So school is that platform, and also teachers, because I think teachers play an extremely important role in shaping the children. And I can still look back and remember my teachers who kind of helped me. And like I said, I kind of give the onus to whatever I am today to my principal because of just a few things that she did, and that kind of touched me and
Mm,
made me the person that I am. So I
mm,
feel teachers play a very, very important role when it comes to the children. And if the school, the teachers are sensitive and understand how children kind of think today, it really helps them shape into the person that they will become. So, like I will share with you, recently I took, there was a kind of a virtual workshop that we had with the children, the students of class 11 and 12. And I was shocked to hear from them, when I told them we were just discussing their career options. And a lot of them actually came up and mentioned that, ma'am, I want to do this, but I cannot open up to my parents and I cannot put this forward to my parents that, this is what I want to do. And, uh, I was kind of shocked that even today there is that huge gap between, I think the students, the children, and their parents. And I think the school, if we are involved and if we can kind of help the children and kind of talk to the parents,
yeah,
and if we
mediate,
have good
navigate.
career
Yeah, yeah,
counselors,
yeah.
absolutely, if we have good career counselors, we can definitely be a big help and definitely help them.
You've hit the nail on the head, and therefore opened a Pandora's box. So, being a very very invested educator myself, I have lots of views. I'm going to try and keep them as brief as possible, but do sort of jump in wherever. I couldn't agree more. The landscape is completely different, particularly for people such as you and I, who have always been in sort of the smaller tier two cities. Just things like cycling across to the neighbors, etc. These things are completely inconceivable now. Like I was mentioning to you offline, also, you need a security detail to go along with the child.
Yeah, yeah,
But
absolutely.
also, you're right. I mean, it wasn't out of irresponsibility that our parents were less bothered. It was just that the environment allowed for it to be that way. Now a parent ought to be hyper vigilant. Otherwise, God alone knows what all can happen. And
Absolutely.
that brings a lot of pressure. I mean, but I will say, Namisha, that even in our time, whereas pressures and chief culprits such as social media and general lack of security
Lack of security.
weren't big concerns. Certainly, there were still children who one knew sort of came, for example, came from a broken home or from a environment where the parents weren't getting along and there was strife. So those kinds of things were still there, and I think there's a lot more openness now to sort of acknowledging and addressing those things. Mm, uh, yes, parenting has changed dramatically. I think even teaching ought to have kept pace because the group of students that one is engaging with has changed dramatically as well. Um, now, having addressed that very, very important sort of almost like a preface or a caveat that parenting itself has changed, also, you're right. The kids are spending not just more time on campus. I think there's also this feeling where things have become a lot more transactional. I think as younger couples have become busier and they're paying greater fee for fancier schools, there's greater expectation from the school, because I as a parent
Definitely.
don't have the kind of time that my parents had to invest in me, plus I'm paying top dollar to send my child to XYZ school. What is the school doing in return?
See, Karthik, again, I think what I see today is that yes, schools are expensive. Schools are trying to give in their best, but I cannot speak for all schools, of course. And if see, the person who is heading the school, the principal of the school, I feel can make or break the school. The vision of a school is what the head of the school thinks and believes in, what their ideology is. So here, if the principal, if the person who is heading the school believes in certain things, is invested in certain things, they can make a huge difference to the school. So, there are times where we hear even of our old schools that, oh, now this school is doing very well. And oh, there was a time, last 10 years, the school was not doing well at all. So why is that? It's essentially because of the person who is heading the school and how invested that person is. And also here, I want to talk about what you just mentioned that, back in our times, these kind of things did happen. And our parents probably were not aware, and probably we did not come out with these things. But I also feel that emotionally, we were built up stronger because our parents kind of did not worry so much, or maybe worry is the wrong word. I think today there is a lot of fussing around the children that is happening because, like you said, there is a lack of time that many parents have. And how do they try to compensate for that? By fussing around, by giving in to what the child demands, not really seeing through the psychological mindset of the child, where what the child actually needs is more time from the parents, and not so much the particular thing that they want. And also, I feel social media has a very, very major role to play in how children kind of are these days and are behaving, and how fragile they are emotionally. I feel these two factors play a very major role. The social media and course the parents. Now, how does the school kind of help in that? So we have both sets of parents that we deal with. We have one set of parents who comes and says that, I put my child here. Now, why is my child not behaving in a certain fashion? What they do not understand is the school alone cannot work on the child. I always feel it's a 50-50. 50% can go from the school, but definitely the rest 50% has to come from home. And by giving the child certain things that they want, because I think today's children are more into the materialistic things. Of course, they have a wide range of things that they want to buy
But
because
that's
that is
also,
available.
that's sorry to interrupt, that's also the love language they've seen, because these conciliate this
Exactly.
this consolation material gifts, also within that construct, chief amongst them tends to be a screen.
Absolutely. And also, we have the other set of parents who are very invested in their children. And we kind of see that difference. It is very easy as a school, as a teacher, as a principal to see how invested the parent is in the child. I mean, you just have to be with the child a few days, and it's something
It's
you
plain
just
to see.
know.
Yeah, yeah.
It is. And now this is not something you can share with the parent. We cannot share it with the parent that, okay, you're not giving enough time. Only when things kind of go completely haywire, and you have to kind of say it, that, I think you need to
Correct,
spend
correct.
more time with the child and, see through what is going on in the child's life. And children also, I feel these days are difficult to understand. So my own children, I have one who's almost 18 and one who's 8. And I also feel that there is such a huge gap, that 8.5 years gap, and that gap in the way they think, in the way they perceive things, in the way they understand the environment is completely different.
Yeah, so it's
So
practically a
so we
generation
have to keep
apart.
changing. Yeah, absolutely. And I think as a school, as educators, we need to keep pace with that and to understand that. And
Yeah.
now this is where we were talking about the residential school and day school. This is where I think a big question comes here, that in a residential school, can we keep track of what is going on with the child as much as we can in a day school? So that's, I
So,
think, a
so
very
one
big
is a
question.
one is a very practical, sort of almost physical, tangible tracking and monitoring, and the other
Yes.
is that it's no secret that although a lot of them are now rather reluctantly, I might add, having to do otherwise, but a lot of also residential legacy schools pride themselves on their sort of archaic traditions and customs that can be quite rigid at times, and they're unwilling to change.
Absolutely. See, like I said, now we need to understand back then. Like I said, children were much stronger, and in a residential school, it is of course survival of the fittest. Like you just said, and the difference today is that in any old archaic boarding school, as you said, uh, the mindset of the teachers or the caretakers or the pastoral care uh, has not changed much, if I may say so. And I feel that is where, I feel we need to bridge that gap. And when children go there, now the child that goes there has come from a family where, they have had a very cushioned life, and again, not just in terms of the things, the facilities, but emotionally.
Hmm.
Emotionally, they have been brought up, very, very with a lot of care and love, and a lot of comforts, which does not happen when they go to a residential school. Emotionally, I feel there is a lot of they need a lot of help when they go, because settlement is not easy in a residential school. And children have their own groups, and it is difficult for the other child who goes in and to settle in and to understand the ways of the world, because I think I can say that, because we humans have a certain way of dealing with situations. And even when we are children, we have our own ways. And we always hear of children being bullies, even 6 7 year old children, there will be bullies, there will be all sorts of children. So we have to be very careful that when we are sending our child to a residential school, is our child emotionally and mentally ready for it? Because when a child is in a day school, I think we are still there to monitor on a day-to-day basis, how my child is doing. Is she very quiet? Is he very chirpy? I think there are a lot of markers here that if we look at as parents, we can make out. Just that we need to be very vigilant on how the children are behaving, but their behavior speaks a lot. Whereas in a residential school, like I used to go and meet my daughter once a month. And in that once a month, we would meet for what, 8 hours. And in those 8 hours, how much did I actually understand
Of
what
course.
was going on with my child?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, very limited. There were, so many other things to just catch up on, logistics, admin, it just flies by. But you're really on to, I think, the heart of the matter, because Now, even if, in fact, I won't even go so far as saying bullying, etc. What's also true to a large extent, I think, is that by and large, again, the type and degree of bullying that used to take place in our time has come down significantly. But even very, very sort of quote unquote normal regular things, a lot of children who have been at home till a certain stage, in homes nowadays, especially with us recognizing that we've started fussing a little too much, will have, there'll be situations that will be first time they'll be encountering, just something as simple as, like go fill your own water, or when one is preparing for a test, things that are being taken for granted, that the mum or the help is getting 50 snacks and keeping track of the breaks, and so many things.
Yeah, definitely. See, definitely, a boarding school teaches a child to be independent. It's that I would say, children learn how to be on their own, and they learn how to fend for themselves physically, emotionally. But what we need to understand is, again, every child is different. What we need to essentially understand here is our own children. I think for any parent who is taking this decision, you need to understand your child and then kind of see what works for you. Because what might work for me might not work for you. And like I say, there is, many parents come and ask me, ma'am, how do I handle this situation or that situation? And I always say there is no right or wrong in parenting. So, what might work for you might not work for me at all. So, you cannot say that do this, do that. There is a lot of trial and error that is happening all the time. I think for everybody today, the teachers, the parents, everybody. So, I feel we really need to kind of understand our own child and how our child is built. And there are certain red flags that we should be very alert and aware about when we take a particular decision
So,
for
so,
our
so, right
child.
before we get into the red flags, I want to quickly wrap up. I mean, recap, because I think we're absolutely in resonance, and a couple of points that have been made. By and large, we agree that for obvious reasons, a certain monitoring is a lot more practically possible when the child is at a day school. Number one. Number two, and I cannot tell you, it was almost like hearing myself talk, because the number of times I have had this discussion with parents who seek my advice in terms of whether to send to boarding school or not. A lot of them come in assuming, oh, he went to boarding school, so naturally the child will go. All I can say is that please, please, please base your decision singularly, almost, on your child's disposition, and now more than ever, emotional and mental makeup. Because what you said is right, you learn to become independent, but then depending on how the child is, that child will learn at what cost or at no cost, and will just benefit. In other words, that it can be a very, very beneficial and nurturing experience, but for certain individuals it can be equally scarring. So it really boils down to the individual. Do not do it because you want to continue a legacy. Do not do it because you've become besotted by the brand of a particular school. Don't do it for any of those reasons. And certainly don't do it for infrastructure, because now, with the way schools are developing in all of our cities and towns, they're pretty much on a par with, ek zamana tha, when, you didn't have the sport facilities or the access to exchange students. So all of that is now happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I definitely think back then it was also about not having the facilities. But now everywhere, you have the facilities. In tier two cities, I still feel a lot of parents struggle with, the timing issue where they have to send their children to, XYZ
Hmm.
classes a day, and,
Hmm.
and they feel that the commute and then,
Hmm.
getting them to go to different classes can be cumbersome. So definitely, a residential school works very well because the child is getting everything under that one roof. But again, like you said, I completely agree with you on that. it should be based on your individual child and the emotional and mental setup. And if at all, I feel this is something I really would like, to tell every parent, even if you take the decision of sending your child and after a year or so you feel, no, this is not working for my child, don't think twice. Get your child back, because there is a very heavy cost that you might be paying. And trust me, no one wants to kind of,
Yeah, actually
pay
that's
that.
really really critical advice, because ये नहीं कि आपने एक बार दाखिल कर दिया अब उसको वो सेंटेंस सर्व करना ही पड़ेगा. So get them back, they're
हाँ,
not at prison.
yes. Yes, because we keep thinking ki, acha, beta, just a few months more, just a year more. And, that's how time goes by, and we don't realize that there
Yeah,
is certain damage that might be happening. And then it's very difficult to go back in time and, kind of
most
make
certainly. So,
amends for
and
that. So,
speaking of damage, then finally, as we sort of wrap up, what are these red flags that you've sort of noticed that you were referring to earlier?
so the red flags, again, I cannot be very sure if I am absolutely right in that. I can purely talk out of personal
Yeah, yeah,
experience here
absolutely.
as a mother, as a mother here more than an educator, because I've sent one of my children, my daughter has been to a boarding school, and I've met her and met her. Of course, I mean, I've seen her go through certain things and her friends as well. And I feel if the child is upset and is crying when it comes to settling, we need to delve into why the child is unsettled. Of course, initially the child will be unsettled when the child goes to a residential school. But we need to kind of have a timeline, and we need to have that relationship with the child and give the child that trust that, yes, you can speak to me and tell me if there is something wrong. Because, when children go at the age of 11 years and 12 years, they're not able to tell parents their feelings very clearly. And I think also because they're struggling
Yeah,
themselves to
yeah,
understand
yeah,
how they're feeling,
yeah.
not just that they don't want to talk about it, but also because they themselves don't understand. So I think as parents, every parent needs to be very open and talk about how the child is feeling. If the child is well settled, wonderful, you don't need to worry at all. But definitely how if your child goes very quiet, definitely something that is definitely a red flag. And if the child kind of goes into this, does not want to mingle socially too much, I think that's also something that needs to be looked into. So, any sort of, I would say, extreme change in the child's behavior needs to be looked into, is a red flag. Any extreme change of
Yeah, but I
behavior
think
is a
especially
red flag.
pertinent is the
And like I
point you
said, there is
make about
one thing.
set. Especially pertinent is the point you make about settling in, and I think perhaps a logical way of looking at it is, and this is what we do in sort of in counseling and therapy as well, that people come in and say that I think I'm depressed, and there is a timeline to it. If your feeling of sadness is persistent beyond a certain number of weeks and is preventing you from doing certain things, that's when it qualifies as a condition. And so, if you know your child the best, if you feel that he or she is breaching those boundaries and beyond that, not settling in, is constantly distressed, it needs to be investigated. And there was one more thing that you had said, which was very significant. Hopefully, it'll come back to me. But yeah, that is a very, very crucial stage. And also, yes, it gives me an opportunity to share a little bit of a tip, if you allow me 2 minutes. So this whole thing about individuals in their teenage, adolescent years shutting off, becoming insular, non-communicative is a global phenomenon. It isn't something that can be helped. It's fairly normal and natural. Having said that, there are certain tools, if we implement with our children early enough, let's say when they are 5, 6, 7 years old, it becomes so much a part of their way of being. One of those is something that we did with our daughter from the time she was very young. Every night, my wife and I and Krisha sit and we play something called Rosebud Thorn. And what it is very simple. Each of us talks about one thing that made us happy that day, one thing that made us sad that day, and one thing we're looking forward to. Now, that has been gamified, and also it never feels to her like an interrogation because all three of us are participating. What parents tend to do often is like an interrogation without sharing anything. That's when it feels like you're being judged and you're under that that one focused light. So this is something, and we know from studies that if you do this type of exercise from an early age, even during and through those adolescent years, the child is very likely to participate at least in that activity.
Absolutely. Karthik, here, I also feel what you're doing is a wonderful job because not only is the child kind of sharing, but I think most importantly, the child is learning to give words to their emotions
Oh,
because they don't know
absolutely.
how to describe. They don't know how that feeling has to be described. What is the vocabulary to be used for those feelings? And I think if we start that young, it really helps. It's like I always tell the parents, in the kindergarten being that don't ask your child how was your day after school. Ask them what was the best thing, what was the fun thing that you did today, because I think that that changes also how the way the child looks at their time spent. Of course, when we're talking about the younger kids, and for the older ones, for teenagers, I know it's very difficult to understand them because there's also a lot going on biologically with them, and so we it's a very thin line, right,
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah,
understand whether it's hormones at play or the child is not happy or there is something emotional here.
yeah.
So as parents, and even I think as caretakers or as a school, it's very difficult to understand what is actually going on. But having said that, that is the need of the hour. That is
Also,
what all of
as
us
there is an
need.
evolution taking place in generations and advancement, everything is becoming preponed, right? So when a girl will start a menstrual cycle, so all of these discussions and modules and classes from good touch, bad touch, at Driveway Devi, the social emotional learning modules that we design, the youngest children के साथ what we do first and foremost is actually emotional vocabulary, because particularly in boys and when they become men, their only understanding of emotion, no matter what the emotion is anger, because that's
Yeah,
all we've
yeah,
seen. So
that's all you
anything
see.
is communicated in that manner.
Yeah, yeah, true, true. And for girls, it's crying.
Yeah.
They mostly will cry, right? So these are very typical behavior patterns that we associated to both the sexes. So definitely that goes, kind of without saying that we need to teach our children the right vocabulary, and we need to understand them better. So and here's there's just one thing I want to mention, especially because when we were talking about residential schools, I really want, this to go to every parent that when the child goes to a residential school, I think the first 2 to 3 years are extremely crucial in settling. And once those 3 years have passed, and once they turn about 15 years of age, I feel that's the time they've made their friends. So I rarely would say one would see issues post that, because by then if they have to settle, we should be and will be
Right,
well settled
right,
in.
right.
And but the first 2 3 years I think are extremely crucial for any child to settle into that environment, because also it is an environment where there is a lot of discipline which the children are not used to, following a rigorous routine every day, and they're not used to that when they go from home. So definitely the first 2 3 years are are a very crucial period for the children and the parents, both, I would say, and the school, of course, as well.
It's funny you mentioned first two, funny and very, very important that you mentioned the first 2, 3 years, because in my own observation and experience, if that 2, 3 years is breached, and to the point you yourself made earlier, the option of bringing back a child is always there, because post those 3 years, even the children who have not settled will remain there, unfortunately, bullied, labeled, shamed, and that trauma will just get aggravated and aggravated and aggravated. And it can go to an extent where that individual begins to believe those things about themselves lifelong.
To be true. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you on that, which is why, like, even I mentioned that it's very important that as parents, we are very vigilant on how our children are behaving. And see, bullying is everywhere. Bullying is a reality. Even in day schools, we cannot escape bullying. It happens everywhere. And I think what we need to do is to make our children stronger and to make them understand that if any such thing happens, they need to share. And as parents, many times we just pass off things and saying, "अरे ये तो लड़का है, इसको आदत होनी चाहिए, इसको डरना नहीं चाहिए." Like, just today afternoon I was with someone and he said, "अरे ये लड़का है, इसको लड़की जैसे मत बनाओ. अगर इसको कोई कुछ कहता है तो ज्यादा ध्यान मत दिया करो." Just like 2 hours back, I was having this
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah,
But that's not how it works today. We
absolutely.
need to understand our children and we need to
Absolutely.
give them that, I would say that comfort to be able to share
And that is
with us.
across the board. This kind of sensitization,
Yes,
etc., needs to be done with faculty, teachers, everybody, because that is
everybody,
our
everybody.
conditioning. Very, very innocently, one can end up saying things like, you come back from the vacation, you're like, oh, nani ne bada khilaya hai. You can't say these kind of
Yeah.
things.
No, you can't say these kind of things. I think as a school, when we know our children, we understand our children, we see any change in behavior, we would want to address that. Every school should, I mean, make that effort. Every teacher should make that effort. And like I said, the head of the school should sensitize the teachers to making sure that if there is any such thing, any such change in behavior pattern, then the teachers should be the first ones to step in and to ask the child what happened and how can I mean, is there something I can help you with? Why are you so quiet?
Yeah.
And maybe not ask these questions directly, maybe just have a conversation, build a rapport. And if at all, then they feel that, yes, we need to talk to the parents. I think if the teachers can help, uh, the entire scenario would change because teachers can make a huge difference.
Oh,
And
yeah,
what they understand
absolutely.
from a teacher, they will never understand from a friend or a parent or a family member.
True,
So teachers can make a huge difference
true, true.
to, the mental setup, the psychological setup, how children feel. We can make a huge difference to that.
Absolutely. This can itself be a completely unending conversation. I've already overstayed my welcome. So we will put a cap on it for now. Maybe we can have a follow up at some point. But thank you very, very much. I'm so happy I spoke to you, because you've just sort of put things in perspective, very targetedly brought up the most crucial points to consider very, very carefully whilst making this decision. So, thank you very much for your experience and insight, and all the best with your school and all its
You.
activities.
Thank you so much, Karthik. I think this is a very good platform that even I've got to reach out and, because it's a question often asked. So I'm very glad that I've got this platform and thank you so much for this. Wishing you also the very best. Thank you.
Thank you.